What was the first game you played that got you into the RPG MMO genre?
Okay, so first game that got me into RPGs was Final Fantasy 1. Like I just rented that game when I didn't even know how to read yet, and that game was in English. And so just the fact that a small kid with like just on his own would rent the game and kill off Garland, like the first version, not the final boss.
Yep.
And cross that bridge without understanding a single line of English in itself, I feel is kind of a special achievement.
Oh, 100%. That's awesome.
Welcome back to Side Quests and Save Points, where the main quest is optional and the side quest is still going strong. You're jumping into part 2 of my chat with Guillaume, the mind behind 9 Dot Studio and the Outward series. In this part, we're digging even deeper into the world of game development, the wins, the struggles, and everything in between. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's pick up right where we left off. Welcome to your save point. Let's carry on with this side quest.
So I did hear that you have attributed quite a bit some of your success of Outward to the exclusive trailers. I think you said IGN published.
I think it's something that helped, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
how-
what is the benefits of having a media outlet have exclusive trailers rather than giving the same trailer to many outlets?
Well, if we think of what is my reach when I say, hey, this game is good,
Yeah.
it's not much, right? If we give exclusive access to an outlet that has a lot of reach and they've got access to a lot of titles, if they say this game looks good, it's just more believable and more people hear it because they're not as incentivized to think that it's good than the people making it or selling it. And that exclusivity means that they want to push it because they've got this unfair advantage over competing outlets, right? And so without even having to spend anything for that exclusivity, we are gaining way more out of it. So there's this matter of like, okay, we've got this shiny thing. How do we make the most value out of having it? And they're just going to push it for us.
So moving on from that, what is your sort of, I know you're probably quite a way away from it. Do you have any form of marketing strategy for Outward 2 in mind? And what about for your upcoming title, is Lost in Prayer?
Yeah, so obviously a strategy that works for one doesn't work for the other. Anything I reveal about our marketing strategy will possibly lower its efficacy.
Fair
So
enough.
we have to be careful in that regard. One thing for sure is that what worked for Outward 1 won't necessarily work for the second one. The game industry has changed a lot since 2019. Traditional press and games have lost almost all of its relevance in terms of like who is really following that, like having your game showcased by every outlets like GameSpot and IGN or Kotaku and Polygon or whatever, it doesn't seem to be impacting sales as much anymore. And even Twitch, which used to be the one thing you wanted for a while, seems to have lost a lot of its weight. YouTube is very central nowadays. So we're obviously going to focus a lot of our efforts there. It's a lot harder to get free coverage nowadays. So we need to be very clever in how we sponsor people to cover the game and like being smart about how we do that. Like if X dude, Y dude, and Z dude are covering the game, even if it's sponsored, if it works well, they've got a lot of engagement from that, then others will follow suit even for free. But like what kickstarts the machine seems to be more and more who you pay and what kind of a video did you get out of it. I know that like one of the measure of success for sponsoring Twitch streamers is a lot like you pay them for 1 or 2 hours, and if they keep playing, they see it as like the free stuff, but it means more like it's a gamble. If you just get 1 or 2 hours, you didn't gain anything really from it. But if they kept playing for 6, 7 hours after that because they enjoyed the experience, now you're starting to get the real value out of it. But the fact that the value of your streaming, of your sponsored stream, is a gamble in itself is super scary. So yeah, that then it's just like how do we stand out? I think in the long term, that I can say, what I care most about is about sophisticated gamers. Like I said, that's our target audience. And so how do we reach out to them specifically? And the answer is if they come to us. And for now, that's our Discord server. That's our, I would say, our most valuable asset. I hate calling it like that, but it is what it is. If we're just talking in the marketing brain thing, like having direct access to them and them having direct access to me is the most valuable thing for Nine Dots, because we can understand each other and I can get that real sense of, are we like on the pulse of our audience's desires? And we can test out things from people who, if we keep delivering, if we keep giving them what they want, well, then eventually they'll trust us for more and more. I say that. They'll trust us even if we get further away from what they came for initially. And Lost in Prayer is a very good test of that. Lost in Prayer is a very different game to like an action open world RPG like Outward. Now we're talking turn-based, grid-based. It's not based on immersion the same way that an open world RPG is. A lot of the design qualities that were appreciated in Outward are found in Lost in Prayer. And I know that only a fraction of the audience of the first one will go to the second. But if they do appreciate it, and if they are part of our Discord server, if they are part of the conversation of that group, that community that we're willing to say, yeah, you should try Lost in Prayer, I liked it. They might not believe it the first time. They'll be like, yeah, okay, good for you. But if they keep hearing it, and then they try another game from us, like they try Witherbloom, and they liked it maybe just as much as Outward, well then, okay, maybe I should try Lost in Prayer as well. So I'm really into it for the more long-term vision of, I want to earn the trust of our players, and I'll focus on not disappointing them and delivering the same qualities over and over again, but in a variety of genres and experience. And we'll see how that goes. And that is the core of the marketing strategy. But that's not the same as ads or sponsored streams or YouTube. And there's a strategy of it, like we want that, but then there's a tactic that for now has to be just building around that thing, because we don't have yet proven that we deserve that trust, because we only had this one game in most cases. Like, we've got some people who came from God Factory, but most people who discovered Nine Dots discovered us through Outward. And so they have just had this one game, and their only expectation is, please make another one. Okay, we're doing that. But hey, while you're waiting, look at this shiny new thing that you didn't think you might want.
I mean, I like being made to think in games. I like in Outward, you have to, well, I've got to do this before I even think about setting off to do what I want to do. And even then, there's a chance that I might not get to do it because something previous is going to screw that up for me. In Lost in Prayer, it's very much the same. You could get to a boss that you could quite easily beat, or a creature you could quite easily beat, but you're like, what if I want to play as it? Am I going to let myself die so I can play as that? I think it's amazing. Got some questions for Outward too. I'm not.
We'll see if I am willing to answer.
If you can, even if it's not a full answer, is it going to be set in the same world, or is it going to be? Yep.
Oh yeah. It's set. It's 50 years after the events from Outward 1. And it's in the same world. It's in Ori, but it is entirely in different regions of Ori. So Berg still exists, Harmattan still exists, but we're not visiting those areas.
And what were your big takeaways from Outward? Not necessarily the successes, but the failures as well, that you want to either implement or change moving into Outward 2?
There's a lot of criticism for Outward that is just like, yeah, that's on purpose, right?
Yes.
Like, we made a game where either you like that or you don't, and we're not trying to do something for both. But there's a lot of criticism that we agree with, and that it was either through lack of experience or most often because we lack the means to do something better or more intricate. The combat system is an example. I'm very proud of the combat system of Outward One, but it is not for everyone, and it requires a lot of deliberation. And I did say that Outward is about immersion. The combat system of Outward One is not immersive because it's not realistic that you need to make a decision like 3 seconds before the hit is landed, right?
Yep.
So Outward 2, we've put a lot of effort into making a combat system that is extremely responsive. And that means a lot of work as well, by the way. So you can cancel your attacks with much more generous windows, and you can blend one move into another so that very seamlessly you can combine things together. And we've added dual wielding where very seamlessly you can change what you're doing from one hand to the other. We can dodge cancel and block cancel most of animations. So once again, like if I were to attack and I want to block almost at the same time, like I can do that in real life. Why couldn't I in the game, right? We just
sense.
thought of those little things, and I wanted something that is more of a nervous playstyle. I really like the dodging in Neo, so I was inspired by that, by having like you got step dodges, because in real life you wouldn't like avoid a sword by rolling on the floor. You would just step out. So we've got that. You can just step out, but if you press twice, then you transform your step dodge into a dodge roll. So those are the kind of tweaks that we're doing. The other aspect is a lot of people said there's no story or that the story doesn't matter in Outward, and I find that extremely sad because the game does have a story. It has a good story, but it is very fragmented because it's told across 3 different storylines. And that in itself is a big obstacle to appreciating it because it might seem very incomplete if you don't do the different storylines. But also, our narrative delivery was not on the same level as the story we're trying to tell. We didn't have cutscenes, we didn't have much in terms of motions and actions from the players as they talk. It was mostly text boxes with very limited voiceovers. And so, because we didn't have a lot of tools to tell a story, people imagined, oh, but they didn't focus on that, and that's fine. But the truth is, no, there is a story there. There is a very fleshed out world. So in Outward 2, we decided to focus on having, like, we're gonna have more intricate dialogue systems with like some zoom ins and more dynamic cameras and some cutscenes and stuff like that. It's gonna be more like every quest dialogue will be voiced from start to finish rather than just being a small segment. So we're really improving in that regard so that people won't say that we didn't try to deliver a good story and that it was an afterthought, because it wasn't. Another aspect was that they felt the world was very empty. And I described the technical constraints that we had from doing a split screen for a game like this, but with more time, more budget, more experience. Now we're trying to add more into our outdoor areas so that they feel more fleshed out. And we're doing the same with our cities. And one core feature that I'm really excited about is the full year calendar. So like in real time, as you play, you get the change of seasons and you'll have some events that are specific to like where you are at in terms of, is it winter? Yeah. Well, then you can go to that place that you cannot during summer, for instance, and stuff like that. So it will feel more alive. It's not just going to be like walking in something that feels very still, aside from a handful of encounters along the way. What else? Oh yeah, and the last big thing that we wanted to improve on was character creation. Man, our characters are ugly. Those faces, those potato faces, they haunt us. And
You
like
played
that
on
was
that on
just,
social media. I love those shorts.
yeah. I mean, we know You think we did that on purpose? No, it's just we did what we could with what we had, and the experience we had both for character modeling, but also like the limitations of we're not gonna do different models for just the head and then the rest of the body and all that. And we were never zooming in on those faces anyway, so it wasn't all that important. So it was just like choosing our battles. But after the success of Outward, now we'll have no excuse if it's still like on that level. So we have not revealed much, but I know that when we're gonna show what is involved in our character creation, that alone will convince a lot of people to buy the game.
Well, when you're playing the game, you're staring at the back of your head for 90% of the game anyway.
Yeah, and in our case, you're looking at a backpack.
What were the challenges with Outward taking it from PC to console?
So the biggest problem really is that because we don't have a lot of programmers, it's a very big chunk of our team dedicated to just that. Most of the porting was done by one guy, but that's one guy. Like considering that we had like most for Outward One, we had mostly like 2 programmers, and we've got the ports done by an external studio once we signed with the publisher.
Yeah.
But then for Definitive Edition and for Stadia, we decided to do it in-house. And that was like way more trouble than we would have wanted. Because essentially we went from not doing PlayStation 4 and Xbox One to doing Xbox Series and PlayStation 5. So on one side was new hardware, so we could start fresh. But at the same time, if we had done PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, there's so much we would have learned there, would have applied to the new consoles as well. So yeah, it was just like having to start kind of from scratch to do it internally. That was difficult. And then there's a Switch port that was also done externally, but that we've supported a lot ourselves with our QA and our producer and all that. And it just dragged on. Like porting on the Xbox Series and PlayStation 5 is a breeze compared to porting it to what is essentially 2 cell phones taped together. So yeah, like Sneaky Box is the studio that did the Switch port, and it was a struggle, like way harder than what they anticipated themselves. But we knew when we hired them that they were underestimating the challenges, and so we just kept supporting them as much as we could. But eventually we got there. But with like, we know that the Switch version looks very rough. But given what you know now on the technical constraints of making even just the game run on PlayStation 4.
Yeah. So are you able to reveal what platforms Outward 2 will be on?
Not yet.
Not yet, no. And you just mentioned QA. So when it comes to QA, obviously you've got your own internal QA. How much do you find developers in general listen, and how much do you listen as a studio? So when you go to like the closed alpha access, the closed beta, the open betas, one, is it surprising the amount of bugs that the everyday player finds, and how important is the feedback that they give in regard not only to bugs but general game progression, like what they like, what they don't like? Obviously you said that Outward was intended to be XYZ, and if you don't like XYZ, you're not going to like the game. It's not a bug, it's an intended, it's a feature.
So the question is a bit complicated.
Yes.
Because I have yet to be surprised by how people react to the games that we make once they play them. To me, the biggest question is whether or not they're going to play it. Once they do, their reactions are usually in line with the different scenarios that I had already in. So there's a bit of a sanity check, and then, okay, which of those scenarios in my head is what's going to happen? Will most people like it? Will most people dislike it for that feature? And then overall, is it going to be something they want, or are we just completely out of the loop and we're not resonating with the public at all? Those are the biggest questions. And then you just validate over time. Is feedback like, I'm not saying that all feedback is ignored, because that's not true. It's more that the devil is in the details.
Yes.
And what matters is not finding out whether or not we were right or wrong on that specific thing, because we were intentional. It's more when we're surprised, or rather, when they are confronted with issues that we would not have thought of. Like, oh, if I have this intent, I wanted to role play as that kind of character, and my only choices are this, this, and that. I'm disappointed. Now, that is something that is more valuable to act on than, I want mounts in Outward, I don't want to be walking around so much. Which is, to me, like, okay, you want mounts? Well, running from one corner to the next of the outdoor region takes literally less than 6 minutes. If we had mounts, you're just gonna zip through the content within like less than a half an hour, stuff that right now just keeps you busy for hours. You think you want that, but you don't, because the implication of adding mounts would be like having
The game
so
time.
much more surface to cover. And also, I think that a lot of developers are just reacting to feedback and taking everything at face value and kind of forgetting the vision they had, or worse yet, they just asked themselves, wouldn't it be cool if? And then they did that, and then people react and like, oh, I didn't think of that. I didn't think of this, and then they just like start obeying, and they treat the game like a product rather than as a creative and artistic expression. So I would argue that the more you let the community shape what you make, the less artistic it is.
That makes sense.
So there is such a thing as a spectrum of art versus product. Like, it's not either or. And Outward is very much intended as like it needs to be commercially viable because we're pouring millions in there, right? So we're not going at it like completely out of the blue. We're making educated guess of, okay, we're gonna do this. 70% of the people won't like it, but the 30% of the people who like it, they will like it enough that they want to pay for it. That's the bet. Now, when you do a playtest, are you actually validating that? Who is playtesting your game? The people who won't like it, or the people who will? To what ratio? Is the comments that you're receiving now making you do something that could push away the part of the public you're targeting that just wasn't there then? At the end of the day, you have to trust your own instincts. You have to be a creator. You have to have intentionality. Artistic integrity is one of the qualities that will define if a game is worth money, in my opinion. Like, I have external shareholders. They don't like that I think like this.
They must
And I
have known what they
understand
were
that they
getting
don't
in
like
for.
it. I understand that they don't like it. Like, I had a talk like that just like 2 days ago where they were asking me, yeah, you need to make Outward like early access, and before that you need to have all those open betas, and you need to just make sure that you're doing everything that they want with the feedback to make sure that it's going to be a hit. I get where they're coming from, but we already have so many things that we want to do with that game, and if we deviate from our current intention just to address feedback to something that is not even finished yet, then are we really gaining something? In some cases, yes. In other cases, no. Because maybe that if we had done that thing that we haven't done yet, they would not have a complaining about this other thing, because they'd be too excited about the thing that we've delivered. But it's still in development. And so the degree of execution of every feature is still like, none went from A to Z. And that shapes how it is perceived. And what we take as valuable feedback is going to change depending on where we're at with every single feature, but also for the whole, it's a whole mess. It's a whole mess to think about. It's worth it. It's stimulating, and we're going to do some playtests, and we're going to gather some feedback, but only when we feel the time is right for us, and also in an honest and transparent manner. We're only gonna do it when we know that we can address the feedback and that it's not just performative, that it's not just a marketing beat.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's dishonest.
Are you building Outward 2 in the same engine as Outward 1?
Nope. We shifted from Unity to Unreal. That was a fucking pain. God, it was painful. It still is painful. Like we spent 10 years with Unity, but they really screwed up.
Which version of Unreal are you using?
5.
So just a few more things before we start to wrap up here. I got a couple of questions from the Tavern community, one of which you've sort of already answered halfway through the episode. So if there's anything else you'd like to expand on, it's from Iridium. Will you be making combat any less clunky? Which you said you have been. It's fun, but the rigidness is a turn off for some. Is there anything more you can add to that? Any more mechanics to combat that you haven't covered that you'd be willing to share?
Not really. The only thing I can say is I agree that it was very stiff, and it's just not anymore. It's barely recognizable in terms of game feel. Like, we actually worry internally. We've had some designers who wondered, like, okay,
Is it
maybe
now
it's
too
not
fluid?
is it still outward now that it feels good?
And maybe, like, I don't know if you can answer this, but if you can, fantastic. Are there going to be any new types of weapons, or are you sticking with the ones you had in Outward 1?
There's going to be some new types.
And then the second question, do you have any plans to make multiplayer a larger focus? For example, either larger parties or cross-platform?
So
Again,
cross-platform,
only if you can answer this.
yeah, cross-platform in itself is less a technological issue than a matter of, like, can we deal with first parties and make it happen? We're not going to do PvP, that's for sure, because everything has to be so tight with PvP. Like, if I play against a creature with my friend, the creature doesn't exist, it cannot be frustrated. So if it attacks my friend, but in their version of the game, because of synchronicity issue, the enemy didn't touch it, but I see that he touched my friend, and then there's no HP loss. Me, I'm happy my friend didn't get hit.
That's
My
a win.
friend is happy he didn't get hit. And the enemy doesn't care. If I do PvP,
You're going to
it's not
start
the
to
same
care.
reality at all. And so all of a sudden, everything has to be, like, by the microsecond, everything has to be so tight, or else it's such a source of frustration. Yeah, there's just a lot of implications. And when it comes to game balance as well, sometimes making something that works in PvP as well means making something that's not fun anymore, just to make it fair. Yeah, so, and when it comes to lobbies and party system and everything, we are still a small studio. I don't want to spend time and energy moderating people and making sure that they behave like adults. I did say that we're targeting sophisticated gamers, people who've been playing for 20 years. We just
Doesn't
want them
mean
to
we're going to
figure
behave
out
like
who they
adults.
party with. Like, if you want to find people to play with instead of having lobbies and such, join our Discord server or ask your friends. And that way, like, griefers will only be a problem for people who just decided to trust just about anybody. But they will have, like, exposed themselves consciously to a problematic person. Whereas if we start doing lobbies and such, we're just making it easier for bad actors to piss off people who just want to have a good time. And any time we spend on that problem is time spent out of making the game better. Fuck that.
And then I have 3 questions for you, just before we finish up. First question is sort of a 2-in-1. What was the first game you played that got you into, like, for example, the RPG MMO genre? And what RPG game would you recommend to someone that sort of goes under the radar? I mean, everyone's heard of Final Fantasy, everyone's heard of Dragon Quest, everyone's heard of Dragon Age. What for you is a good RPG that is still playable in these times that people don't appreciate?
Okay, so first game that got me into RPGs was Final Fantasy 1. Like I just rented that game when I didn't even know how to read yet, and that game was in English. And so just the fact that a small kid with like just on his own would rent the game and kill off Garland, like the first version, not the final boss,
Yep.
and cross that bridge without understanding a single line of English in itself, I feel is kind of a special achievement.
Oh, 100%. That's awesome.
But I can name quite a few. Baldur's Gate 2 was
Shadow Savam.
massive for me. It was
Yep.
just, it shaped me as a role-playing fan.
I'm
Final
assuming you have
Fantasy,
played Baldur's Gate 3.
I have not played it much. I've got maybe 20 hours. I
But-
am,
How did you feel when they
I'm
announced that?
sad because I don't like it. I don't like Baldur's Gate 3, but it just, it just doesn't have the qualities of Baldur's Gate 2. It has its
No,
own qualities.
I understand that,
It has its own
but
qualities, but Baldur's Gate 2 was so important, and God, and I'm sure I'm gonna go back to Baldur's Gate 3, but
I'm just so glad they brought Boo and Minsk back to Baldur's Gate 3.
I mean, that's one reason for me to keep going, I guess. Um, but yeah, so Baldur's Gate 2 was big. Final Fantasy 1 was my first uh was my gateway drug. Final Fantasy 7 is like I know a lot of people say that, but it is in my top 3 games of all time. But from there I started exploring, and I want to talk of like the catalog in general of Squaresoft back in the PlayStation 1 era. Like anything that had Squaresoft written on the box was worthy of being bought. Parasite, Vagrant Story, Legend of Mana, Sega Frontier. God, so many amazing games. And then that's really funny. I was working in a factory for a summer job, and there was this guy that almost never talked with me. He was my foreman, and he just asked me out of the blue when we were bored, like, "So, Guillaume, do you play video games?" Hey, maybe. What if I do? And then we started talking, and he just said, I used to play a lot of video games, but I don't think I need to do that anymore. Now I just have this one game that is everything for me. Huh? I said, like, once you play that game, you don't need to play other games. It's called Morrowind.
Mine was the same one.
And I was like, huh. And he just started talking about those systems where he just wanted to play a guy who's a monk and like he just needs to punch things in the face and doesn't need to wear armor. And that's just because he decided to level those things. And we're like, that sounds really funky. And the box of Morrowind, like there was nothing. It was just like, it was just
Yep.
written Morrowind on it.
Morrowind.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if you didn't know, you didn't know. And I just trusted the guy, rented the game, and then I returned the game, and I went to buy my own copy because fuck that, I'm not renting that game, I'm buying that game. Of course, it's the most amazing thing ever. And
I was buying, I think it was one of the Final Fantasies, and I remember I was with my mum at the supermarket, like just a grocery store that happens to sell video games as well. And the guy on the checkout goes, "Have you ever played Morrowind?" And like he was talking to me for the good 20 minutes or so. He was scanning the shopping, and I picked it up the next week
yeah, yeah. And that
and
game was
never
so
looked
much
back.
more than everything we could have been told. And of course, Morrowind was maybe the most important influence on outwards design. And there's this video by Reddit Oscar where he just compared the two, and there is no greater compliment than to compare my tiny little game, Outward, please like it, to Morrowind. And for the other question, like, what is something that people might not have played that is still approachable today? For now, without hesitation, answer would be Romancing SaGa 2, who got a remake not too long ago. If you're really, like, if you're experienced in JRPGs, that game is just so much bigger and so much more complete and complex and filled with hidden secrets and possibilities. I don't think there's a single person who can say they know everything about Romancing SaGa 2. And usually when there's a remake, the things they change are less good than the original, right? Looking at you, Final Fantasy VII Remake. But Romancing SaGa 2 is the greatest remake of all time. Because they addressed some of the... It's a bit like Outward, where there were things about the premise of the game that meant that it would have some flaws. So, spoiler alert, in Romancing SaGa 2, you play multiple generations. But that means that you cannot be all that attached to your characters, because eventually you play the next line of characters.
Yeah.
You reform your whole party multiple times throughout one playthrough. And that means you get to try so many cool builds and team formation and everything. There's just so much to explore. But your characters are kind of bland. And so the story in itself kind of feels like just an excuse to explore its systems and mechanics. Well, in the remake, they couldn't make the characters have more personality, but they made a more complex story for the antagonists that you follow through the whole story. And so now the characters that you learn to discover are the enemies that you're chasing after. That is fucking genius. That is wonderful. And Joe, it just sets the table better for one of the most ambitious, most systemic, most toy box, sandboxy experience of all time. And they just brought in a package that is like addressing so much of the quality of life issues that the game had because it was a Super Nintendo game, Japan only. And now we've got this version that has addressed its single most important weakness, which is that narratively it felt dry. And they just added quality of life and better graphics and more accessible. And what's crazy is, like, we're talking about a game that is top down, which is, you know, those tile sets to make towns and such. And they just made replicas of that, but in 3D. But like the first time I went out and looked at the city, I recognized it. But from this perspective of being in third person, there's such the attention to detail, the love, the passion that went into like the respect for the original content. If you like yourself, you must play Romancing SaGa 2.
I will
It's
give it a
amazing.
try. It's been on my watch list. I haven't got round to it yet. So
I got the writer for Outward One. Like I got him to play it, and he's going crazy over it.
So, second question: what game? Two most current games that you're playing. One within the RPG MMO genre, and then one outside it.
I just finished my, I don't know, maybe 25th game of Age of Wonders 4. It's my favorite 4X game of all time. I've got like 900 hours on it, and it was released in 2023. So you can make a quick calculation there.
Someone's been playing during work hours.
And I just started Avow, so that's an RPG. And I'm kind of swapping between Caves of Kut and Avow. Those are the two RPGs that will keep me busy for a while. I'm saying that thinking, yeah, but what about Metaphor that I'm like maybe halfway through? So many RPGs, man.
There's too many to play.
I would say too many. I want more.
Right. And then
I'm okay with having too much.
Yep. Right, and then sort of the out of the box question, the 9 dots question, if you would. If you could take an NPC from any RPG or MMO game and go out on a date or an activity, who would it be, and what would you do?
That you need to realize, well, probably you probably do realize. I've played a lot of RPGs, so
Yeah,
there's a
there
lot
are
of
so
characters on my
many.
mind. And some of the answers I don't want to say because they'd be spoilers. And I don't want to spoil anyone with that stuff. God, I would need to pick a woman, that's for sure. I mean, if we're talking about dates, I guess that date with Aris and the Gold Saucer looked fun. I guess I could go for that. I could try to replicate an experience like this. But
let's transpose it to a real life activity.
okay, you know what? I tried to find one really kick-ass warrior type and
Yeah.
have them help me inform the design on combat in our games.
There we go.
There you go.
That's a very good choice.
It would make me a better game developer. So that maybe I could okay, how would you do this? Yeah, so I'd find a very accomplished warrior type character.
Rig the motion capture up.
Yeah, something like that. Let's go.
Well, have you got any closing thoughts, remarks, or anything you wish to say? Obviously, you do have your Lost in Prayer. I mean, it's the demo's out on Steam now. Been out for a little
the
bit.
demo is still out. If there's really one action point, it would be Lost in Prayer is still rough, but like we were talking about feedback and all that, right now, the feedback we receive for the game is definitely something we can act on before release. So if there's anyone who's curious about when we take our design mentality and apply that to a roguelike, yeah, that's one thing where people can help us shape a better experience. Making such an intentional game as Outward is a different thing than a roguelike, where a roguelike, it's so many interlocking systems. And for a roguelike to be good, it has to contain stuff that we, the devs, did not even think the players would do. And in that case, playtests become very valuable.
Yeah,
So,
I must say,
it would be my closing thoughts is if you guys wanna just see what Nine Dots is about, if you want to have a clearer picture of who we are as a dev, one game cannot be enough to know us, but from the moment you've played 2 of our games, you can start making associations. Yeah.
Yep. I must say, that was one thing I did notice. It stuck out to me a lot whilst I was watching you play the demo on stream, is that you were taking feedback, asking questions to the audience, and seemingly giving it straight to the developers there and then. You're making notes, and it's just it really, really stood out. It's like you care a lot, not only about the game but about the people that play it. And I'm sure some of the feedback that was given is not going to be implemented for one reason or another. But you wrote it all down.
Yeah.
It
will be even if we don't do it, doesn't mean we don't consider it. And sometimes feedback is useful not for that game but for the next one. If people want a game with mounts, it cannot be Outward with mounts. No. But maybe we can make Outward-ish with mounts, and then make something that makes everyone happy. So yeah, we do care, we do listen, and if it doesn't affect the game, it can affect the artists and the next game.
That is that for this episode. Obviously, all the links for everything are going to be down below or up above, depending on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. So that's a wrap for this episode of Side Quests and Save Points. Huge thanks to Guillaume for joining me today. It is not every day you get to chat with someone that willingly makes a game where getting lost is a feature and not a bug. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to check out 9 Studio. Links to their Discord, both for the Outward Discord, their 9 Discord will be in the description below. And if you've got strong opinions about quest markers, survival mechanics, or why we put ourselves through brutally hard RPGs, please come and tell us in the Tavern Discord. We're always up for a good discussion or group therapy session, whichever one is more applicable. Next podcast episode, we'll be joined by Joseph here. He is a content creator, someone who's also recently discovered Pokemon. Despite growing up in the time of it, he never got round to playing it. So we'll make that a good discussion and see why some people don't consider Pokemon a JRPG when it theoretically is. So until then, stay safe. Keep an eye on your stamina bar, and remember, if you don't know where you're going, you're probably already on an adventure. So we'll see you next time.